In New Mexico today, a judge removed the January 6 rioter and Cowboys for Trump founder Couy Griffin as a county commissioner because of his role in the attack on the Capitol. Griffin had been convicted of trespassing earlier this year. Today's ruling states that he violated a clause in the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution by participating in an insurrection against the U.S. government. Griffin is also barred for serving in any future state or federal elected position. This constitutes the first time that an elected official in the United States has been removed from office for participating in the January 6th riot or insurrection. It's also the first time a judge in the United States has ruled the events on that day were, in fact, an insurrection. Joining us now to discuss, Peter Wehner, a former official who served in both Bush administrations as well as under President Reagan. He's also the author of the book, The Death of Politics: How to Heal Our Frayed Republic After Trump. Peter, thanks so much for being here. Let me start by just getting your reaction to all this news about apparent malfeasance in Georgia. We're still waiting for the investigation to come through. The removal of this New Mexico county official who was a rioter. I remember when the Republican Party used to talk a lot about how they hated voter fraud. This was a very important issue to the Republican Party. I don't hear any Republican officials talking about this today, except for potentially Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger.
Yeah, I remember those days too, and they're a long time ago. Look, what's happening, I mean, it's both shocking but completely predictable. The Republican Party, this current variation of it, iteration of it, is a nihilistic party. There are no boundaries, no guardrails, and there's no place they won't go. And so we see manifestations of this here, there, and everywhere, and they come up, on a daily basis. But fundamentally what's going on is this is an attack on truth, it's an attack on democracy. So we're going to see a lot more of this.
And just to underline, this is not partisan. You are a conservative Republican. I would just want to underline for our viewers. This guest speaker who was featured at Trump's rally this weekend in my home Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, right. Cynthia Hughes, Trump invited her to speak to the crowd. She's a leader of a support group for January 6 defendants, including her nephew, who is a convicted Capitol rioter. Take a listen.
He went to the nation's capital to hear his president speak. He dressed in a suit and tie and his favorite hat. Tim wanted to take part in what he thought was going to be a historical event. Instead, he witnessed a horror show.
Well, speaking of horror shows, here is her nephew. This is him. He's a Nazi sympathizer. His case went viral after the Justice Department released photos of him sporting this distinctive Hitler mustache. One of his aunts complains that one of the aunt's complaints is that he's been held in jail since his arrest in mid-January 2021. She didn't mention, of course, that the judge, who is a Trump appointee, is afraid that he will turn his violent anti-Semitic neo-Nazi rhetoric into action. He has said things like, quote, Hitler should have finished the job. Why give this woman and her horrifying nephew any sort of platform?
Well, because I think Donald Trump is deranged. I mean, I think he's a sociopath, and this is how sociopaths act. And I actually think that he's getting worse since the election. But that's not surprising. I mean, that has always been who Donald Trump is. I think the key story, I'd actually argue this is probably the key political story of this century, is that the Republican Party fell in line behind Donald Trump. That's what's different about it, and why that's happened is a long and complicated and dark story. But there is a large part, I'd say a majority of the Republican Party, the MAGA base, which is, they're authoritarian in their tendencies, they're activated, they're agitated, and they feed on this stuff. Trump understands that. He's out of tune with the country. There's an exhausted majority. Most Americans are in favor of democracy. They're in favor of defending truth. But in terms of the base of the Republican Party, it's hard to overstate how radicalized it is. And you see it time and again because they are consuming this stuff. Once upon a time, the Republican Party, at worst, would have been silent before this stuff. But now a lot of people are celebrating these kinds of people.
Yeah, and I also want to note, last week you talked about the president's behavior, former president's behavior. He went on a wild spree on his social media site, Truth Social. Take a look at this post that Trump re-truthed instead of retweeted, which is the Truth Social version of retweeting. The words, "Your enemy is not in Russia," over the faces of the vice president, the president, and the House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi. There are a couple of posts like this. It's alarming and, of course, in some ways just a regular day of the week for Trump. And then there is what he said over the weekend at the rally in Pennsylvania. I want to play that again just because it is really shocking to hear any president of the United States describe the Justice Department and the FBI in this vein.
The FBI and the Justice Department have become vicious monsters controlled by radical left scoundrels, lawyers, and the media who tell them what to do.
So there was a lot of criticism by House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy and others when President Biden used the term semi-fascist to describe this Trump MAGA movement. But what do you call it? I mean, your enemy, your law enforcement and your opponents, your political opponents, are enemies. They talk about locking people up because they disagree with them. They're trying to overturn an election. I'm not using a term for it.
Right.
But if semi-fascist isn't the right term for it, what is the right term for it?
Well, I think semi-fascist works. I think authoritarian works. I mean, there are a lot of political scientists, political theorists can argue what the particular term that's best. But underneath it all is this movement, this mindset, this disposition, which is to attack democracy and to attack truth. And that's what's happening. And it's not a semantic. I mean, you can get into the semantic game. You know, Kevin McCarthy, to object to this, I mean, he was a lapdog for Trump using the most extreme rhetoric, including what we saw over the weekend.
Trump has called plenty of people fascists, by the way.
Exactly. And I should say that President Biden actually qualified the semi-fascist comments. He said that it had to do with people who either condoned violence, acted with violence, or didn't recognize an election. So he was actually careful in what he said. Look, the Republican Party, people like McCarthy, are eager to be offended. They are always going on the offensive. They're lashing out. That's the temper and the mood of the base. And they're cowards. They're hollow men, to use a phrase from T.S. Eliot, and they're doing whatever the base wants. That combination of Trump and a radicalized base and a timid and cowardly political leadership in the Republican Party has created a real danger to democracy. This is a tinderbox, and these guys are using blowtorches.
Peter, we want to thank you for coming and also recognize that it's not easy to say these things about your own political party. So thank you so much for your clear-eyed view. Appreciate it.